Hi, Christina.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing better now that we have electricity,
Yes, heat is good.
hot water.
We had hot water, but we had no heat, and that was rough.
Yeah, yeah, we lasted a couple of days before we skipped town.
We went and stayed with a friend. I was so cold, I couldn't get away.
Yeah,
Again, I just want you to let you know at 6 o'clock we start streaming the meeting. That way, if anybody's watching, they know that we're just waiting for other people to get on.
hi Nicole. Nicole, I think you're on mute.
Your end, and I'll just. Can you patch me through on the audio, or
I
I'm
heard
just
you.
trying to figure out how to get the audio from the meeting since it's not.
I can hear you now.
That's not very well.
We're trying to log. There's the YouTube. You could watch it on YouTube.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry, Nicole's having some problems. She can't hear us. Jerry, you're muted.
But I'm connecting from my phone. I'm trying to get it to work on my computer. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jerry, the city manager.
Good to put a face to all the emails.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And you're coming to us from Seattle. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
All right. I hope the internet works better in Seattle.
It's three of us here working from home, so it's taxing here as well.
Of course.
Xfinity tells me I have the fastest service available, which still doesn't help, but so.
Are we expecting more people to show up?
Yeah, I sent it out to everybody. I think Councilor Riley wrote in that he can't make it because he has another meeting, but I didn't hear from anyone else that they weren't coming.
Mayor Walters is at South Fork.
Oh, that's where Bill is too.
And then is Transportation Advisory still happening tonight? Or is that canceled?
Public Safety Advisory Board is
Oh,
canceled.
transportation.
I'll have to check our calendar. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry. And I think Nicole had said to me that Evan wasn't able. This was via text message. I can't remember when I got it. I think Evan wasn't able to attend. I'm not sure if Fred was able to attend, and I'm forgetting other people that she might have mentioned.
On our calendar, it's just the Police Oversight Committee and this meeting. So I'm guessing not the Transportation Advisory Board meeting.
Did Nicole just call in, Kathy?
I don't have like a phone number or anything for her to call in. So it looks like she's trying to get on her phone now.
Yeah. I think she's trying to get back on.
Can anyone hear me on this one?
We can.
Oh yeah, we hear you.
Great. And my video stops whenever I talk, so that's just perfect. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for showing up, everybody. This is great. So I just was hoping we could give a big warm welcome to our guest speaker, Mr. Pennell. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me.
So I think it would be fine for us to kind of move into your discussion quickly, if that would be okay, if we don't have anyone else. Is everyone in agreement with the agenda for tonight? Did everyone get a chance to see that we're going to be hearing from Mr. Fennell, and then also getting a chance to talk a little bit more about our nuts and bolts for forming our group? I wanted to make sure everyone felt okay with having seen the agenda and is okay with moving forward.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Fennell, please talk to us about your experiences and give us some guidance. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Well, before I do that, I was Liana Perez, who was our director of operations for NACO, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, asked me to sit in for her this evening, but I was not really clear on. I see that you're a police oversight task force, but I don't know much about your history. So if I could get just a little background, because then I'll know what to say, because I have so much. I don't want to just start talking and you guys say, okay, that's not what we want to know, or we already know that.
That's great. Thank you. I'll speak to that. So our city council had asked the task force to come together in order to come up with some recommendations about developing a police oversight body that could help take a look at the policies that were already in place and some issues with discipline and maybe like just building bridges between the citizens of the community and feeling that there's more transparency in our local policing. I'm not sure if we should have also put you in. That was, I think, a large response to a case involving Mr. Fester and how an investigation into him was handled and an internal investigation. Thereafter, a Portland resident who was an employee of a West Linn resident, and there was a question of appropriate jurisdiction in the West Linn police investigating Mr. Fesser in Portland, and then he was arrested, and so there was a large amount of damages paid out to Mr. Fesser. So I don't too much into that, but I think it definitely brought it highlighted in the community that there were some pretty grave concerns about our policing habits at that time, and so there was a call to action to develop some kind of committee that would come together and really delve into the issues of police policy and discipline and transparency for how complaints are managed. So if I kind of just didn't gloss over it too much. So that's what we came together to do in September. And as a group, we started out with about 13 members as alternates in different backgrounds. We had representation from people with legal background and law enforcement background and voices of people of color. So all have convened to. I a lot of people. I don't know if y'all do too.
Yeah.
Goodness.
It's done. It's gone.
All right. So so in this process, we have discussed what kind of models we think would be important for West Linn. We reviewed some police complaints between 2015 and we had a chance to look at stops data. And so in our review of that information and in talking with our acting chief, Chief Mahuna, and trying to sort out what we as a community need, it seems that we need more transparency, and we'd like an official body to be able to be independently reviewing complaints, and also maybe have subpoena power, can be investigations run. So we're still in that process of what do we want to make this look like, and we need to figure out the nuts and bolts of how many people need to be involved, and the funding and the charter information, all that stuff. But I think in this sliver of time right now, we were just hoping to get more input about really the what model would work best for our community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that helps me out tremendously, and I appreciate that. And before I begin, I'll give you a little background about myself personally and how I came into the field of oversight. I am a retired police officer out of Indianapolis. I worked there for almost 24 years, various capacities as the majority of that time was as a detective of some sort, and the majority of my detective and investigative experience was as a homicide detective. I was also a robbery detective and other major cases. But then for the last almost 8 years of my career, I worked in community affairs. So I worked closely with the chief, worked closely with the community, helped develop and run a law enforcement-based mentoring program, and help build up community affairs branch within the Indianapolis Police Department. Before, it was like a hodgepodge of different individuals that did community outreach or various things. So we got it organized. After I retired, I went immediately into oversight. First worked in Chicago as a supervising investigator for a team of investigators, and we investigated Chicago police officers. Primarily investigated officer-involved shootings, uses of force, and other major allegations of misconduct against members of the Chicago Police Department. Some of those investigations resulted in criminal charges as well as administrative charges being filed. Left there after about almost 16 months and became the executive director for the Citizens Police Review Board out of Oakland, California. And again, investigating allegations of misconduct against the Oakland Police Department, helping to create policy, lots of community outreach, lots of community involvement, and was there for almost 5 years and helped build that office up from 2 investigators until when I left, it was 9 investigators, full-time policy analysts, full-time admin, as well as a part-time admin, had our own attorney that we contracted with, and developed and created the intake unit so that we could actually intake and receive complaints directly in a more systematic and organized manner, and created case management and complaint app so that people could file complaints directly from their mobile devices. And then we'd had a way within internally to manage those cases. We went from about 50 complaints a year to receiving upwards of 500 to 600 complaints in that time period. So pretty proud of that work. And currently I'm in Seattle, and my role here is as a strategic initiatives lead or manager. So I help oversee special projects. And currently we're doing Sentinel event review of the events from last summer, the protest. And we're actually creating, turning that into not just for the protest, but it's going to morph into our ability to do systemic review and Sentinel event reviews of major incidents, such as shootings, other protests, or any other big incident that happens either on a singular basis or on a prolonged basis, such as the protest. And also, we're doing some training where we are now conducting effective interviewing and communication techniques, not only for our department, but members of the Office of Police Accountability and also members of Seattle Police Department. And we're in the final rounds of doing that training, and then I'll roll right into working with the contractor to develop the train the trainer portion so that we can take some of the people we've trained and actually create trainers and then roll it out through the entire police department. So right now we have about 20 individuals in our initial program. And that's it in a nutshell. And in all that, I serve on the board of NACO as their treasurer, been on the board since 2015 and been the treasurer since 2017. So pretty busy. But to address the matter at hand with what's going on in West Linn, I'm glad that you guys are doing your homework, because forming a police oversight entity, requires that you do a lot of legwork up front and get the input from all of the stakeholders, from the police department, the police union, all the way down to your community activists and just regular people on the street. And it sounds like that this is something that maybe was on people's minds before, but then you had a critical incident, which kind of came at a time coupled with the things that happened on the national level, and so the decision was made, hey, let's do this now, and which is a wise thing to do before you have a major incident. So and it's thrown together haphazardly. So I like what I heard when you said what kind of model or what kind of entity would work for our community. Because the first thing you need to know is there's several models. You have the police auditor model, you have a review model, you have an investigative model, you have a model that just makes recommendations, and you have like commissions or other models that actually can hire and fire, police chiefs and actually met out discipline. So you have various models and you have hybrids of those models, but each community is going to have a different set of those parameters. When I was in Chicago, that's a full investigative model. I mean, we actually conducted the officer-involved shooting investigations. The Chicago Police Department didn't do that. They conducted the criminal investigation, but we conduct the actual investigation. That meant I'd had a team that would roll out to the scene. We'd go to the autopsy if the person was killed. We would subpoena records, and we did it all. And, we could order the police in, and they had to show up. And it didn't matter who they were, from a beat officer all the way up to a commander or whatever. If they were involved, we dealt with them. And then there's other models across the country that are more like models that recommend, where they will listen to the community concerns. They may look at some policies, and then they'll make recommendations to the chief. And then the chief has so many days or a month or so to respond as to if the department's going to accept the recommendation fully or in part or not at all. And then they have to respond as to why. So that creates that transparency, But so that the gamut, it's a wide gamut. Each model obviously comes with an expense. A full investigative model requires lots of people, requires people with expertise, requires a huge budget. Particularly in a city that, like Chicago, that has, roughly 2 shootings a week, officer-involved shootings, or can average, 3 or 4 a weekend. I mean, it depending on how hot it is and what's going on. So you have people responding out, and you have a huge budget. But then that city also has huge lawsuits. So they need to have something like that to counter that. Smaller community may not need a full investigative model. They may need more of a model, that focuses on the policies and maybe looks at trends and does data analysis, you know, looks at training, and then helps the department formulate policies that work for both the agency and the community they serve. So, and you only find out what you really need by talking to as many different people within your community and within the oversight community in general, all across the country, to get that information. And then you can come back and say, what will work for us? What's going to work for our community? And I could go, like I said, I could go on and on about the differences, but it really boils down to doing your homework up front, what you're doing, and then coming back, and then as a team, as a task force, making the recommendations to your city leadership based on best practices across the country, and what the practitioners and academics that are in this profession, what they recommend. I don't know. I guess I would ask the question, and I'm not sure if you can answer, but how many complaints does your police department receive from the community? Because the discipline issues that are internal versus the discipline issues that come from community could also be a difference, as to what you want to review. If it's like a personnel issue where an officer, violates a rule, and their sergeant or their supervisor addresses that may not necessarily go to internal affairs. I don't know what the policy would be, but it may be something that as a oversight entity, you also want to know about. Because if the officer's having problems coming when he's at work and they're dealing with it there, that may also be a signal of a bigger problem that eventually would happen when they encounter a community member. So you may want to also review those matters as well. So again, it would be just difficult to kind of give you an idea without knowing what the numbers look like, what's the data look like, and where the problem really lies. Sometimes you may not have I would say, a customer relations problem, with police and the community interacting improperly, but more so a policy or lack of policy problem, where there's not a strong policy or a policy is not even in place. So therefore things happen, and you can't discipline an officer if you don't have a rule for them to adhere to. So those are, again, things you have to identify before you can decide what type of entity you need, and what level of resources you need to go towards that entity.
Well, thank you. Helpful. I think what we had noticed in our review of complaints is that we have a pretty low volume of complaints, as I mentioned, maybe 5 to 8 a year, and some are frivolous and some are not so frivolous, and do require a closer look. But we, again, the caveat to that is the complaint number that was reflected is complaints are collected like directly from the police department. And as you mentioned, you set up a kind of an external system that allowed people to make their complaints via app, and that increased your numbers. We were also discussing having some kind of independent registry of complaints so people could not have to walk into the police department to file a complaint. So we're expecting we may see a change to that low volume, but that is currently, I mean, we're a small community, it's about 25,000 people. But it was looking like on average 5 to 8 complaints a year. And those were external complaints. As far as internal complaints, I did not do any homework on that matter. We did have some really helpful community members give us evidence of internal complaints from officers who were concerned about the supervisors, being inebriated while on the job and things like that. So there's certainly probably a way to find out more about those complaints and not just rely on community members to give us that information, and maybe directly asking our police leadership about internal complaints. But as far as our external community-based complaints, it's the lower volume right now.
Well, and yeah, so that goes with what I was thinking. I mean, I didn't know the size of the city or department, but just looking at just from doing this with different agencies across the country, I had an idea that right now your lower numbers from external or community based complaints would probably be more so because, number one, they don't trust the system, so people don't file. Lack of access to file, or you have to go into the police department versus being able to file online in the moment that if something happens. I mean, it's sort of like if something happens in that immediate instant right after, okay, you're fired up about it, but after you've gone through your day, gone to work, gone home, dealt with the kids and everything else, a couple of days have passed, you just say forget it. And it doesn't mean it didn't impact you. It's just life happens, and that's just one more thing you don't want to devote time to trying to deal with it. So if it's something that you can that a person could do in the moment, then that's fine. And when I speak to police leadership, I tell them this oversight isn't out looking to get police. Okay, it's all about creating a process, and you mentioned transparency, is creating a process that's independent, that's objective, and that is accountable, holds people accountable, that helps build trust. Not only the trust in the police department, but the police have the trust in the community because now everyone trusts the system or trusts the process. Right now, the community doesn't trust the process. So they may not file a complaint. And you mentioned complaints that, say are frivolous. Well, those complaints might be, and I don't want to, I'd be careful how I word this. I know it's a public meeting, but they might be from people that have other issues going on in their lives. So that for that person, that's a real situation. But when you evaluate it and look at it independently, it's nothing there. It's not, it's no basis for the allegation. There's other reasons why that person files that complaint. But you might have people that simply, you might have an officer that just is rude to people. And finding out about that officer and correcting that behavior before it becomes something major is part of what the police supervision and police department should want to do, because now the city leadership may stop a liability issue from growing bigger by getting that officer the help they need before they actually do something that causes some major harm to someone. So you're able to identify a trend from a particular officer where people different people are filing a complaint about rudeness or discourteous behavior. So then they can bring that officer in and say, hey, what's going on in your life? So you're offering help to that officer. And see, this is why I try to tell police leadership, oversight can help police departments in a number of ways. It can help by creating policies or making policies better. It can help by identifying officers that have other things going on in their life that are more wellness based, or the big thing for the last few years is officers and their mental health. We owe it to the officers to make sure they have the best mental health services available because of the things they endure and see. We should treat that no differently than we do if an officer gets hurt or shot on duty. We need to treat that injury. So these are things where oversight can be independent oversight can be a tool that the police departments can use to help their officers. It can help with training, identifying training needs or training deficiencies, and then helping create and get the best training. Or it can help in the use of equipment that's not maybe being used properly. So it's not just about disciplining officers. It's about identifying systemic issues and helping to rectify those issues. And that's how we like to look at it. So you would be able to, as a task force, be able to bring these things to light to the city leadership, to the city council, to the chief, and then work towards fixing those issues. And then that helps build the trust within the community, because now that problem doesn't exist. Now you have a solution to that problem. And now officers feel like, okay, we can go out and do our job and not worry about, getting complained on or getting sued, because now we do have the right tools. We do have, the right resources.
I'm really
So,
glad you're mindfulness and meditation and mental health for our officers. I think that's something that our current acting chief really values too. And
Yeah.
I think this is a great opportunity to kind of take the pulse of those day-to-day interactions. Do you know, with your prior experience in setting up those independent complaint tools, is it possible to have those be anonymous as well? I mean, do you have that as an option? So if
Oh
people
yeah.
just, okay, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. When I was in Chicago, well, I think they just changed state law in Illinois. I think it was last year, or maybe it went into effect this year. But it's very recent, where people could file anonymous complaints. In Chicago, in order to take a complaint, someone had to sign an affidavit. And by signing that affidavit, basically, I kind of remember it, but basically is, you're swearing that the complaint is true, and if not, then you're subject to criminal charges. And I only had to seek criminal charges once in 16 months, and it really bothered me. I had to do that. I mean, it was a bad complaint. I mean, it was a total lie, but some people that I worked with felt like if they investigated a complaint and they found the complaint to be unfounded, which meant they had evidence to support that it never occurred, then they would seek the criminal charges and say, well, that person lied. My argument to that was, well, unless you can find evidence that they lied, okay, and there's a fine line between finding evidence that it didn't occur and that the person that told you it did occur is lied about it, because from their perspective, from their point of view, that's how they felt, or that's what they said happened. So it just created an unnecessary burden for the complainant, in my opinion. So it took several years after I left before they were finally able to shift that law. But I think that even if a person if they file a complaint that you can later determine that is not true, that it didn't happen, or that they out and out lied, well, then the officer suffers a little, because they're under the pressure of being investigated, but the process worked because it proved that they didn't do it. If that makes sense, you know, as opposed to going after the complainant, the community, the people that are inclined to do this will learn, okay, I can't get that officer with a bogus complaint. I can't rely on that officer because the process works. You know, right now, if they, you know, the officer might get in trouble, and then the officer might say, but I didn't do anything. So now the process hasn't worked. Now what have you created? You created an officer that's got, you know, a chip on their shoulder. And now you have created a bad officer because now they have bad feeling about the whole process and the agency they work for. So see, that's the benefit of having an independent oversight entity and a process that is effective and objective. You know, because if the person lies on the police officer, the process is going to prove that to be true. And if the person is telling the truth and the officer is wrong, then the process should pan out and the officer should get disciplined for it.
Nikki,
Yeah, does anyone else?
I just wanted to point out that Linda's had her hand up for a little while.
Because I can't see hands on this. Okay, thank you. Linda?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Can you see me? I can't see yeah, I don't know why. I apologize. Hi, Anthony. Thank you for attending.
Hello.
Appreciate it very much. I was the one that reached out and talked to Liana.
Okay.
And I have an answer to your question with a question, unfortunately. In the state of Oregon, the kids take an Oregon Healthy Teen Survey, and it's probably the best science-based data and analysis that we have. And that was recommended to possibly have the community, the kids, you know, look at our Clackamas County Healthy Teen Survey. I mean, it's a great survey, but it's woefully inadequate for what we need right here. But in the video, Liana and, you know, is it Cassandra? We're talking about it's a new science, and that you're starting to do these surveys of a data collection and analysis, and it's a new science. And it was a fellow out of Northwest University, and so I'm wondering, is that, I'm a little concerned we jump the gun sometimes. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not a good term. We jump out there and try to fix something, and we really don't know what we're fixing yet. We don't know what the problems, plural, are. So are you aware of some surveys that we might be able to take a healthy community survey? I'm not talking about these, survey monkeys or something like that. I want something that's really allows people to actually say that, you know, they feel like they've been profiled. They feel the harassment or racial profiling or these kinds of things. Because I am hearing from people, but they blow it off as, oh, it's nothing, or it happens all the time. And like you said, I think I've asked my question, but it's mainly the other thing I talked to them about is just an example. So say we chose a model with say an auditor and an ombudsman that would collect, one would be collecting like information on homicides or suicide by police, and the ombudsman would be covering these things where someone could feel comfortable saying, you know, I felt like I was being racially profiled. I felt like I was intimidated. So whether by police or somebody in the community, or, you know, somebody in authority in the community. So I'll leave that as the question of, can we maybe be thinking about doing a community-wide survey first?
Well, and to answer that, yes, that would be when I mentioned earlier about, you know, doing your homework and speaking to your as many stakeholders as possible, you know, from both ends of the spectrum. Part of that is doing some data gathering, whether it's as a survey, whether it's through a series of town halls, multiple different town halls at different times of the day and different days of the week, you know, so that as many people as possible have access to participate, and then you can gather that information. One way, and I did this for the city of Modesto, California, because I also do, on top of everything else, I also do consulting. So whenever I have a minute or two, but I did this for Modesto, where they came to me wanting to, you know, start up an oversight entity. And the first thing I asked them was, what's the problem? And they told me about all of these police shootings. And, you know, when I lived in Oakland, I'm thinking, little Modesto? So, you know, I helped them craft some public records requests, and we were able to get a lot of information. We crafted the public records request, but then we also met with the chief of police and city attorney, and we're able to get lots of data from the police department going back, I think it was 6 or 7 years. Well, I went through the data, and, you know, surprisingly, they did not have as many police shootings as everyone told me they had. And the shootings they had were not set up racially as everyone had told me they had, you know? So when I was able to lay the data out, I sat down with them and sat down with the police chief, and I said, you know, you guys really don't have a police shooting issue. It sounds like you have a communications issue where the police department's not communicating all the good stuff they're doing to the community, and the community is building these stories up. You know, I said, yes, you've had police shootings, and yes, every shooting is bad, regardless if it's justified or not. It's still, you know, something that harms the community and harms the police department. But the shootings that you guys have had were all, I mean, the officers were confronted by armed subjects, and, you know, it was not, you know, shootings that you would call controversial, other than just the community didn't like, you know, that it happened, but it wasn't a shooting that would lead to criminal charges. So I'm still working with them, and it's because of the data that they're now having a different conversation. Now, they still may end up forming a police civilian oversight entity, but it'll be with more of the lens of let's continue to do the good work and help the police department continue to do the good work, because they don't have the shooting issues that, you know, Oakland, which is about 70 miles from Modesto, has, or San Francisco has, or some other, you know, big Bay Area city has. So I say that to say, you have a town hall, and your community members will still come out and they're going to tell you how they feel, how they felt on the traffic stop, how they felt with the police encounter. And then you can look at, if you want, you could look at stop data from the police department to see who's being stopped, how many people that are being stopped are getting tickets or being arrested. You know, there's a great study out of Stanford University where they did the stop data analysis for Oakland Police Department. Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt did that study, and they're able to determine that, you know, they were able to prove that, yeah, Oakland PD stops more minorities, issues fewer tickets and citations and arrest of those minorities than they do with whites and Asian members of the community. And from that, they were able to determine that if they're stopping more minorities and issuing fewer tickets, then there could be some profiling going on, because there's nothing there. There's no probable cause to stop them. But with the whites and Asians that they stop, although they're stopping fewer, more of those people are getting tickets or getting arrested. Therefore, they have a reason to stop them in the first place. So that's something you could probably look at, you know. But figuring out and hearing from your community is very good. You need to hear those stories, but then you need to go back and look at the police department and say, okay, why does the community feel this way? Is it a communications issue? Is it another issue? All the issues are real, but it's just what is causing the issue. Is it communication, or is it actual profiling, or is it a single officer, or is it a systemic issue within the department? So I hope that helps.
That helps. Thank you.
I know, Counselor Baumgartner, did you want to talk to Mr. Fennell about policy? Because he's had some experience with kind of delving into policy oversight specifically.
We can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, okay. I
There you
don't
go.
know. It wouldn't unmute for a second. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fennell. I appreciate your being here, and thank you, task force members too. Yes, I just introduced myself. I'm Mary Baumgartner, and I am a fairly new city council member, and I'm very interested in making progress in this area. And I'm interested specifically in some of the research that I've been doing, and as a result of the task force bringing to my attention and our attention, the police policy. And in West Linn, we don't really have use of force issues as much as we have abuse of power, failure of accountability, racial profiling, and some past pretty notable incidents that you may be even aware of. So my question is, I would love to hear what you might think about the percentage of impact between the difference or the contribution of police policy, specifically in our case, Lexipol policy, and just police culture and the culture of administration within a given police department.
Okay. Well, I'll say, and this is, I'm not speaking on behalf of NACO or anyone else, but my personal feeling about Lexapro is that some of the policies are okay, and then others that they produce aren't, in my opinion, strong enough. I believe they are base for a department, that doesn't have its, a full policy unit or research and development unit. It's a good base, but I think that each department has to take that base and then again reach back to the community and reach back to its constituents to help build upon that. So I've looked at departments that use the Lexapro platform, and it's it kind of scares me when you look at particularly uses of force and different things like that. I think it's a cookie cutter for that. And then how that translates to the culture is because each community sets its tone. So if you have a community and you want to say, obviously most communities will say, we don't want any use excessive force. We don't want this, we don't want that. But on a national level, there are some communities that allow, for instance, a carotid hold, or a carotid, the use of carotid takedowns, and then other communities flat out forbid it. So if it's not in the policy, it explicitly says don't do this, then you can't discipline if someone does it. Or if someone does it and it results in a catastrophic injury, now the city's paying out, and someone's getting sued. But the policy didn't reflect that. But on a national level, there's experts that'll say you shouldn't do this. So when you're using something like that, like a Alexa poll product or some other form product, then I think you really need to decide as an agency and as a community, how much farther do we want to go? Because if you don't put these policies in place, if you don't identify the systemic issues within the agency, then it can help shape the culture. And oftentimes that culture doesn't align with the community because the two haven't talked. So I think when you're looking at your policies, even as a city councilor, you have your open session, you take your community input, but I think you need to have those small groups and really get, allow the community to weigh in on a policy and then bring it all back to say, okay, this is what we need legally, statutorily. This is what we need from an officer safety issue, but this is what we also need from a community, not only a community safety issue, but a community culture issue. And then that helps shape it.
Thank you. I do understand that to some degree, I mean, it's a bargaining issue, but I would love to hear if you have seen any communities using an alternative, or is there something else out there other than Lexapol that people who, smaller cities, like you're saying, smaller police departments who don't have their own policy department are able to use? Is Lexapol the only game in town?
It's the biggest. I'm not familiar with any of its competitors. I think it's the company has created a place for itself, and again, I think it's a good base to start with. Particularly if if an agency says, "Hey, we want to redo all of our policies," it's a very efficient way to streamline that process and get as many of the areas covered. But then I think you really need, particularly on the what I call the policies that reflect the high liability issues, such as pursuits, vehicle pursuits, use of force, arrest and search and seizure. Those kind of policies that result in your biggest complaints and your highest payouts. You really need to use that as a base and then look at what other departments are doing across the country. I mean, you figure a New York City, an LAPD, a Chicago PD, big departments like that, they have most of their general orders and policies online, and they're more than willing to share those with different leadership. Now, you don't take New York City's use of force policy and bring it to West Linn and just use it, but there's things in there to consider that would be, if I were creating a policy, I would get as many examples from across the country, including Lexapol, but look at all of them and then begin to build a policy that works for that particular city or community. So I mean, there's no sense in trying to recreate the wheels. It's a lot that's out there, and you have a lot of tried and true practices in some of these major cities that have already experienced everything and then some. So they've got policies to cover everything pretty much.
Thank you.
There's hands up. Let's see, Shannon and Jerry and so whoever wants to go, I guess.
Shannon Lee Erskine here. I'm with the city attorney's office. Mr. Fennell, where would you say in your work with Nicole, you've seen the best oversight body, the most successful?
It's a loaded question. And as a board member, I can't say who's got the best. What I will say is that there are definitely some cities and entities that seem to be working better than others, but it's really it's really dependent on the community and the police department, and the city leadership. So, because there's no city or no entity that no two that are alike. So they all, in their own way, kind of work for the community they're designed for. So some communities now are seeing that the model that they formed maybe 10 or 15 years ago needs to change, and they're making those changes, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it doesn't work. I'll give you an example. Last year, we all know what happened in Minneapolis, George Floyd. And one of the first things, of the many things that came out, one of the things also came out was the ineffectiveness of the oversight body in Minneapolis, and how they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And the people there that run that agency and had been a part of that agency over the years took a lot of heat. Well, a number of things. One, they operated within their ordinance, they operated within their governing rules. So if they operated within their governing rules and you still feel like they can't do anything, it's not their fault. Change their governing rules. Give them the authority to do this. Give them the authority to do the things you want them to do as a community. So, to say that they're ineffective or to bash them was not right, And then there's other departments, other cities that may be labeled as organizations that work, but they haven't had a George Floyd incident. Their ordinance and their authority hasn't been tested yet. So I would say, I guess to answer that question would be, the agencies that work best are those that have the strongest governing authority, whatever that means for that community. Okay, so if West Linn decides they want a full investigative entity, then that investigative entity needs to have the authority, like we had in Chicago, where we could go in, where we didn't even have to go in. I could sit at my desk and go right into Chicago's databases, personnel systems, disciplinary systems, any of their CAD and radio systems, anything from my desk. Some agencies, they can't do that. I'm working with Austin, Texas, and in order for their oversight entity to prepare for a hearing or to review a file, they actually have to go in to a location, and they have to have a member of the entity stand there while the board members review the IA file. Basically, you have to tie up a staff member and a volunteer community member. And these IA files, it may take a person 8 to 12 hours to review one, but you can't sit in a room, take off from work and do that. And you can't do it after work with a staff member that's not going to be there for 6 or 7 hours. Whereas some departments in some cities, in Oakland, I would send the file to I'd give a copy of the file to the board members and let them review it at home on the weekends in their leisure time. As long as they were prepared for the hearing, I didn't care when they reviewed it. So it really, it all depends on how strong that ordinance is, how strong that governing body or that charter amendment is, that will make it successful or not. Yes, go ahead.
Maybe not. So not giving the best system, but would you have any recommendations for the task force for cities or models that you, I guess, either in your capacity as a board member or you personally, to look at as examples that appear to be successful?
Well, based on the number of complaints that you guys receive, and it sounds really like to me that you would probably do a lot more policy review or policy development than disciplinary issues. I mean, you may find that there's some internal disciplinary issues that aren't reported out, but just looking based on what you just told me, it sounds more like you do a policy and maybe training overview. But California has a lot of strong models. I mean, San Jose has a independent police auditor model. I came from Oakland, and the premise I would say is strong. There's other flaws there that involve personnel, but the premise is a strong model, and with the right people, any model is going to work successfully. DC has a good model, and I'm trying to think. I mean, like I said, there's many good models. But I mean, those would be some that I would look at, and then of course, I'm just trying to think of Denver. Denver has a really good model as well to look at, and that's a moderate-sized city, and so does. Let's see who else. Not Charlotte. Fairfax County, they're only a couple years old, so I don't know. I haven't had much Fairfax County, Virginia. I haven't had much contact with them in the last year, but they're only about 3 years old. But again, a newer model might be someone you could talk to as well. But like Denver, San Jose, been established for a while. Oakland's been established for a while, so you could get a lot of good information from those cities.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about Eugene?
It's right in your own backyard, and I didn't think about it. Yeah.
That was too easy.
Then of course, I mean, Seattle, we have an inspector general. Well, we have a 3-pronged model, with the Office of Police Accountability that's independent of the police department, that actually does the investigations, and then the IG's office, what we do. So if you're looking at an IG model, and then we have the Community Police Commission, which is the community-based arm or leg of the 3-pronged stool that we use here for oversight. So again, it's just looking at deciding what model you'd like to develop, and then looking at the various similar models across the country, and then drawing from the best from parts from each of those. And there's a report coming out, should be coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be posted on the NACO website. But we did a study with the COPS office and DOJ, and I think it was 11 or 12 agencies across the country, and we did a study in comparison of all of those. So the final report is coming out in the next couple of weeks. It's done, and I think they wanted to wait till the transition with the new administration, particularly with DOJ, was done. So whatever the political piece has to do with that is completed, then that report will be ready for release. But that would be a good report to look at, because it gives you 10 or 12 agencies across the country, and it actually breaks it down for the good and the bad of each one. Jerry.
Which report was that? I missed that.
It's I can't recall the name of it. It's a report we've done. We did it with in conjunction with the COPS office and Department of Justice. It was, we've been working on it now for 3 years, so it's been going through the editing phase, and with the new administration, it's now sitting somewhere until everyone gets in place, and then they'll allow us to release it, but it's going to be NACO. NACO's name will be all over it, and it'll be on our website, and you'll be able to download it, look at it. But it's going to also have an interactive, and I think the interactive map is already functioning on the website, but the report will go with it, and it'll break down various models, oversight models across the country, and a really good in-depth study of each historical study, and then show, what's working and what's not in those different cities. Yes.
Councilor Baumgartner, Linda Hamill, you have your hands up. I didn't know if you wanted to ask questions too.
Sure. Counselor, why don't you go ahead? I'll wait for you.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could tell us what you think about your observations on the union pushback that happens around, I mean, I'm listening to you saying the oversight body, if I'm understanding you correctly, the oversight bodies with more governing authority and investigation authority are the most successful, but is there a union resistance to, I mean, isn't there some kind of a give and take on that?
Well, yes. And when I say it's not that the oversight bodies with the investigative authority are most successful, is the ones that, regardless of what their task is, the ones that have the strongest ordinance or governing ordinance or charter. So if they're an auditor or review, if they have, strong language in their ordinance that really delineates the work that they do, outlines the work and who's responsible for what, that makes them most successful, because they spend less time, fighting with the union and fighting with city leadership or police leadership. Now, the union, as a matter of practice, I mean, that's the standard message from the national level, like from the national FOP, is to push back on all oversight. Their language has been, that civilians can't make these decisions based on, well, because they're not police officers, they haven't walked in their shoes. But, I've been on both sides of the badge, and I can say, yes, civilians or non-sworn or non-police officers can make those decisions, because you have rational people at the table, you have reasonable people at the table. What I see with the union, and the reason for their pushback, is most of these entities, or a lot, I shouldn't say most, but many of these entities are born out of a tragic incident, which is then driven by very strong activists. So you have one end of the spectrum pushing the envelope and wanting to make certain decisions. So of course, the police union builds up that strong resistance to that. Again, I go back to what I said before: as long as people trust the process, then you don't have a problem with the union. When I went to Oakland, the police union was a strong adversary against oversight. Well, once I learned of the history between the unions and the local activists, I could understand why both hated each other. Before I left Oakland, I at least had, I was able to at least sit with the union, present information to them, and they would reason with that. Did we terminate officers? Yes. Did we find officers, sustained officers on allegations and discipline officers? Yes, we did. But they were starting to trust the process, because they felt like their officers were, their union members were getting a fair shot, a fair chance, and were getting due process. So I think that's why I said, you need to talk to everyone and all your stakeholders, you got to have a conversation with the union leadership as well. I'm not saying they're going to agree to it up front, because most of the time they're not, until they see that the process is fair and that their members are getting due process. And really, you know, a lot of people talk badly about the unions, and they've earned this reputation, and some cities rightfully so, where they defend officers at all costs. But, you know, if you have transparency and a proper oversight entity, then if an officer screws up and they deserve to be terminated or they deserve to be disciplined, well, that process is transparent and fair and objective, and no one can argue against that. Even if the union decides to defend that officer against that discipline, you have more chances of winning in arbitration. You have more chances of prevailing once they've exhausted every avenue of their due process. So, you know, I just look at the union as, yeah, it's got to be there, and it needs to be there for many reasons. But when it comes to oversight, you just don't allow them to push back on it. You let them do their job and you do your job. And if you do your job right and the officer has violated or committed that policy violation, then you will prevail if you've done it right.
Thank you.
Well, Linda, looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, okay, there I am. Oh, I wish I could get my camera working, because then I just turn this, what I have around. I think I may have found Liana may have sent me the report you were talking about. I think it's called, did you say it was called COPS, U.S. Department of Justice, Community Oversight Policing. I think I may have found it.
No, she wouldn't have sent you that one. We haven't released that one yet.
Okay.
We've done other reports. We've done other reports in the past, but the one I'm talking about is we're excited about it, to say the least.
Okay.
It's going to be,
Well, then I am too.
it's a big endeavor, and cops, I mean, everybody that's read it is very excited about the potential of what it's going to bring to policing. So,
okay.
Yeah.
If you would, maybe we could find out what that is and be on the lookout, or receive it as soon as it comes out.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Most definitely.
Okay. Okay. Could you briefly describe then the models that utilize for example, a seven body civilian oversight committee in conjunction with the say an IG or auditor's style, so that you've got two bodies going on at the same time. Is that right? You've got your citizen task force, or not task force, you've got your citizen oversight committee that just
Right.
like any other, like the planning commission, you know, people apply for it and they have a 2-year term or what have you.
Yeah, here and in many cities, we have the Community Police Commission, which is made up of a number, I forget the number, but it's more than 7, but it's made up of volunteers who they're appointed and serve for a period of time. And their primary role obviously is community engagement and being that voice of the community, but they also look at policies, make policy recommendations, make policy requests, and look at the policy, discipline, and other activities, including the budget of the police department. And they bring that information to their meetings, which then creates a community opportunity for community to have input and weigh in on this. And we call it the CPC here. So the CPC is one arm of the oversight entity here in Seattle, and it's the oldest arm. So, and then you have the Office of Police Accountability, which is a civilian-led department that is independent of the police department, and their responsibility is to investigate allegations of police misconduct. They also issue recommendations to the city for policy changes. They can issue immediate recommendations. Say if they identified an issue that is so urgent that immediate action needs to be taken care, needs to be enforced until we can have a thorough review of the incident. But they'll issue those reports. But then they conduct the actual investigation of the complaint and will issue a finding that's then submitted to the chief with also along with recommendations for discipline. They have sworn and civilian investigators, but the entire administration or entire leadership of the department are civilian. So you have a director and 2 deputy directors, and then you have your civilian staff of admin and maybe policy and community outreach, but then your investigative staff is made up of both sworn officers and civilian investigators. And that has taken the place of your internal affairs branch within the Seattle Police Department. Now you have the third arm, which is the Inspector General's office. We do systemic review of, we can do a systemic review of any unit within the police department. We can look at any issue that arises, looking for trends and patterns. There are some statutory audits we have to conduct on an annual basis, others that we have to conduct, say, biannually, but we have some statutory audits. But then the police chief can, or the CPC can request that we audit, conduct an audit of, say, a different department or unit within the police department, or any other issue that arises. They can make a request of us to review that. We can either do the audit as a formal audit, or we can do an informal review. So that's our audit side. Then we have a policy side in our office that takes that information and looks at trends and patterns and other data, and will help direct policy recommendations, create policy that's then forwarded to the CPC and to police department, or any other data analysis that we need that goes in conjunction with the audits that are conducted. And then you have the side for investigations, and I kind of work more closely with investigations than not, but the investigation side reviews all of the internal investigations that OPA does before, and we certify those before they're closed out. And we certify them for 3 things: objectivity, timeliness, and thoroughness. And if they're not, if we don't feel they're objective, if we don't feel they're thorough, then we'll send them back to OPA with further instructions. Now, OPA can choose to do that or not, but if they don't complete that, then we won't certify it in that category. What OPA wants is to have each investigation certified in all 3. What they don't want is at the end of the year to have investigations that aren't certified in all 3 areas. They have 180 days to complete an investigation. So if they exceed that 180 days, they're not going to it's not going to be certified as timely. If we identify bias or there's some other issue with objectivity, then they're not going to be certified with objectivity. And lastly, if they don't do a thorough investigation, or they miss, evidence, or miss a witness or whatever, then of course we're going to ding them on that. But otherwise, we certify in all 3. And so that's the check and balance there. And then my role is, again, overseeing special initiatives such as police department is embarking on, some peer wellness and officer wellness initiatives. And what we do is we don't necessarily tell them how to do it, but we're monitoring it. I'm working with them, with the police department, helping them identify initiatives that are being used all over the country, such as EPIC and ABLE initiatives, and then bringing those back and helping work through that, or I have been helping SPD create their wellness unit, which is going to be an all-encompassing unit that not only helps the officer with their mental, physical wellness issues, but also their families, and we'll extend it out to retired officers as well. So that's a project that's on the works. And then also I talked about the training, the effective interviewing and communications management training to help their investigators and street officers conduct better investigations, conduct better interviews of people in order to get the right information, and also not conduct like an interrogation where you see on television where they're screaming at the suspect and all that kind of foolishness. Because what you want to get is the right information the right way, and you don't want to have false confessions or misinformation that's given. So that's the hybrid that we use. In most cities that have a civilian board of some sort have staff members that serve that board. And it just really depends on if it's like an investigative model where they review the investigations that are conducted, a recommendation model where maybe they look at every internal affairs investigation that's done to make sure, again, it's thorough and objective and timely. But, with that comes some training, and it comes ongoing training. It's not just one-time training for the civilians, because they aren't law enforcement, so they don't know the policies, they don't know how it works, but they can get training not only from the police department, but from the ACLU, from lawyers and bar associations. They learn about police tactics. They also learn about constitutional law and other local and state laws, and they learn about the policies that the officers have to work under, so they understand those policies. And that helps them identify deficiencies in those policies where they can bring back recommendations for change.
Thank you. Very thorough.
Well, I get accused of that sometimes, and it's hard for me to give a short answer because there's so much in this. One answer doesn't just cover a single incident. It's so many different nuances to it.
It's evolving science. It is an evolving science, and it's
yes, it is.
And I'm so delighted that you have spent this much time and energy in it already, that we're going to be the beneficiaries of it. So thank you.
Well, again, it's really whatever the community wants, and then people have to recognize what that community is, and it's everybody, from the police to the union members to the people on the street. And the people on the street. We work closely in Seattle with practitioners that service the homeless community and people that have mental crises, because again, those are the people that encounter the police the most and are the least likely to contact an oversight entity. But when they do, again, their complaints may be labeled frivolous and oftentimes they're nonsensical, but you have to go through them to see where that nugget of truth is, or you have to align with someone that works with them on a day-to-day basis who can then speak for them. So this is, you really have to get down to where people are and bring this to them, because oftentimes they see the oversight entity as another arm of the government, which we are, but we like to think that we're the good guys.
I wanted to, sorry, there's some feedback. Acting Chief Mahoney, I see you join us. Thank you so much. Did you have any questions for Mr. Fennell, who's from NACOL?
I'm sorry that I joined so late. I was at another meeting from 6 to 7, and so I've been trying to absorb as much as I can. I read his bio. Nice to meet you, Anthony. Nothing that you've said tonight, everything that you said tonight makes total sense, but I only caught the last 30, 25 minutes, so I apologize. I'm sure the first hour was fantastic also. I did have one quick question, though. You talked about the COPS office for the DOJ. Is any of this available through the CRITAC, the Collaborative Reform Initiative through the Technical Assistance Center?
Will be, because we just got on that, I think, last week. So that's why I know that acronym, because we just talked about it and got on it last week. But yeah, we're going to be we should be a member of that now, or they should have our information there. But once all of our reports are going to be available in multiple areas, I mean, obviously on our website, but then through that database and that resource, and then there'll be links with other entities like IACP, major city chiefs, anything noble, anything that's related to law enforcement and law enforcement leadership. We're trying to show them that oversight isn't bad, and many law enforcement leaders across the country, I mean, they wholeheartedly support oversight. It's just, I guess they have a balancing act they have to do, with their unions or whatever, but they do believe in the benefits that oversight can bring.
Oh, absolutely. You talked about the procedural justice of it all, right? The fact that there's a fairness component to it, and that's how you're going to get buyout from the troops, from the unions, right, from everybody, is through the fairness component. And it's going to have to be a developed trust, right? Because nobody's going to walk in the door trusting everybody. But when the process shows to be fair, it's unbiased, it is thorough. Those are, I mean, like you said earlier, how do you argue against that, right? There's no argument against that. So those are all, I mean, fantastic things.
So you're a police officer too?
I am. I'm the current acting chief of this place.
All right, Chief.
I've been a police officer for 28 and a half years. So.
All right, Chief. Just where you talked, I said he's got to be the chief for somebody.
Well, that's all I had, Nicole. Thank you.
I also wanted to touch base with our other members, Mr. Harper and Ms. Garcia Sale. Do you want to ask any questions?
Hi. I want to thank you for the wonderful presentation. I took a lot of notes, and I think we have a lot to look at and work with here moving forward. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I could see your hand moving. I said, okay, she's writing down everything I'm saying. Mr. Harper?
You hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I want to echo, first of all, I'd like to thank Chair Nicole and all the counselors for putting this together, and especially Chief Mahoney for being here. I just want to say thank you for the knowledge that you gained. I think I'm coming from prior to this, we had a board that was sort of anti-police and wanted to do our own thing. And we find that since the city manager and the councilors hire the chief, it's important to be able to go through them first and in regards to changing policies or adding avenues of due process. So I'm hopeful Chair Nicole has allowed me to learn the history of the city of Westland and the police and the city management. But I just want to gain insight into who determines the actions of the police, and I think it's our city manager. Is that correct, Jerry?
Not sure what you mean by the actions of the police. You mean the policies?
Yes. So Chief Mahuna, he stated earlier, he's the acting chief. Who makes sure that he becomes the chief? Would that be you, or who votes for that? I mean, who makes that happen?
Sure. So the just to update everybody here, a few weeks ago we put out a request for proposals for recruiters to do the recruitment for the police chief. We received 4 proposals. Those proposals were reviewed by me, Alyssa Preston, our HR director, Derek Peterson with Noble, who's also a sheriff of Multnomah County, and Don Johnson, who's he is the fire chief in Lake Oswego, who's also the former police chief. The recruiter that we select, and we haven't made that selection yet, will conduct the recruitment and conduct the hiring process. They'll get candidates, and it'll be intensely, there'll be a lot of community involvement, probably more than my position was. And ultimately it's my decision. But there we go. So that's the long process of how it all would work.
Right. So see, that's the issue we had with our prior issue that we had. It just wasn't the police, but it was the city manager and the counselors that were involved in the issue we had to pass. And I know Chair Nicole sort of feels the same way. If we after the city council determines that we will become a tier 3, we will be behind in this process of hiring the chief. So, and we will not have an opportunity to talk about the successes of the acting chief. So that's one of the areas that when we talk about fairness and transparency with the city of West Linn, that's the area that even I know the counselors all know about the process. I mean, we can take that to the voting booth in 2 years, but we can't do anything with the city manager in the selection. Who knows this fire chief in Lake Oswego? I mean, hell, I don't know the dude, and he's not my neighbor, but it's still one of those things that when it comes to fairness and transparency, as I observe of the city, that's something we need to look at. And I didn't want our guest to hear me say that because of his success in this, and what he's going to potentially do for the city of West Linn. But it's apparent that we have some work to do. And if we know the structure and who determines the actions of the police, I think as a committee, we can do a lot of good things and propose some good policies that can make some things happen immediately. So thank you, Chair Nicole, for allowing me to speak.
Just to add a couple of things to that. Mayor Walters was also on that panel. But what I want to comment a little bit about that is that's unusual too, that it was so open and that an elected was involved, so therefore the public was involved, because the mayor is elected by the public. And we also brought in people from outside agencies to give more perspectives on that, because they have experience in policing. So that's only for the selection of the recruiter to do the police recruitment, not the actual. I mean, it's essentially an HR role too. So I just want to be really clear about all of it. And then the way it works too, Michael, the council has one employee, and that employee is me. Or under the charter, the council appoints one employee, and they have those decisions over the city manager. And then in the charter, it says that they're allowed to give input on personnel, and I can pull it up. But that's just sort of the broad, big picture overview. So just wanted everybody to kind of give an update about where we were in that process as well. As long as I'm chatting, Anthony, I've got to know, did you work with IPRA? I'm from Chicago, and Michael's from Chicago too.
Yeah, I worked with IPRA. I left just before its downfall.
What years were you there? Do you mind saying?
2013 to 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I I saw the handwriting on the wall.
Yep.
I'm out of here.
IPRA is the investigative independent police review authority in Chicago, just for everybody else.
You know, IPRA is a good example of a pretty good premise, but without the right people, it starts to collapse. And that was really its downfall. It had some leadership issues. And yeah, over time, it became too familiar. One of the things for an oversight entity, it has to be independent, has to be independent. You know, if it becomes too intertwined with any, whether it's electeds or the police department or any combination of that, then you might as well scrap it and start over because the community's not going to have faith in it. And that was basically the downfall there. It became too intertwined with politics.
I didn't thank you myself for coming on such short notice. I really appreciate it. And Linda, thank you for connecting us. Appreciated it a bunch. This was a great meeting.
Well, thank you. And, you know, like I said, this is what I did. This is my second chapter. And, you know, I always tried to figure out what am I going to do with all that police experience, because I did not want to go into security. So found something better. Yeah, Chief, there's life after police. Trust me.
Thank you so much for your time. I think we've all learned so much tonight. So,
okay. Well, what I'll do, and you're welcome. And what I'll do, Jeff, is when that link, when that report comes up, I'll make sure I'll send you you know, the link or something, and you can share with everyone. Like I said, I'm hoping we get it posted. We're able to release it within the next 2 weeks. I mean, you know, it's been done for a while, but since even before the election. But with the transition, everybody thought it was best to wait, which made sense.
Okay, well, I think our next part of this meeting is more housekeeping related, so I don't want you to have to be on the hook for that nuts and bolts business. But
I've been working since 4 this morning, so I'm fine. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, and I'll be in touch. I said Jerry. I'm sorry, Jerry. So thank you, everyone, and you got my information. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them to me or whatever. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks. Well, I know it's getting to kind of the close of our meeting, but I did want to just touch base. The last meeting we had was fairly. There were a lot of emotions, so I just wanted to kind of do a temperature check and see if everyone's feeling okay. We did end up losing some members, but we still have some members here. So I just want to say thank you all for showing up today. I know everyone's got a very busy schedule, especially just, you know, recovering from last week still. But yeah, I just wanted to touch base and give everyone a chance to weigh in by hands or wave. If anyone wanted to share how they're feeling, I want to give people an opportunity to do that.
I'm raising my hand. Okay. So yeah, the last meeting was challenging, and I'm concerned about the loss of members, and I don't want to lose any more. So I'm wondering if we need to be, or if maybe you already did this, Nikki, are you check in with people individually so we know who's still here and who we may have lost?
I did reach out to people, and it sounds like Evan has a conflict. He may or may not be involved from here on out. Ferno is definitely out. She does not want to be involved anymore. Nancy's moving to Las Vegas, so she's not going to be involved anymore. It sounds like Fred he's got a lot of other conflicts, so he's probably not going to be involved anymore and may just come on from time to time to speak. but not in any kind of regular kind of like not on a recurring schedule. Let me think. Rishi said he needed to kind of think about whether or not he wanted to continue. So so that's kind of where I'm at as far as what I know, where where we stand right now. So I think the faces we see here tonight, we see,
Okay.
and those are the ones we kind of go forward with. I don't want to spend too much time if people aren't really responsive to the emails or wanting to be in the meetings, going after them, trying to get the input. If people want to join in the meetings and share the input, and that also speaks to, like what are we allowed to be doing? I think here is the safest place for us to, be adherent to public speaking laws. And so I think what we see on the meetings is the involvement we're going to have. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
For other hands up, does anyone else want to say anything? Okay. All right. So I feel like we got a lot of a big volume of information last week with the NACOL data shared with us, and then obviously from our speaker tonight. So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't say. I forgot I was not on mute.
Oh. So I think at this point we still need to kind of take some time to figure out what's best for our community, what works best for our city folks, what works best for our police, and what a way we can collaborate. And I was wondering what your takeaways were from what our guest was saying as far as the model that's going to work best for our city. So I wanted to open up the floor to anyone's takeaways and what they kind of see moving forward.
I definitely think it's a good idea to look into the models of the specific cities that he mentioned. So I'm curious to start digging into that.
So would this be a good time for kind of a subcommittee breakout to look at San Jose, Oakland, DC, Denver, Fairfax, some of those, I think, what are those, like 5 different municipalities or counties that he mentioned? Would 2 people be interested in working together on that?
I can be one of those people.
Could you state that again? Exactly what?
Yeah. So
just state the assignment.
The assignment would be, our guest had mentioned San Jose, Oakland, DC, Denver, and Fairfax County as excellent models to look at. And obviously they're all larger than we are. But maybe there are some takeaways from the way they wrote their charters or how they have their designs in place to succeed. So if we could have 2 people look at that before the next meeting, I don't know what the volume would be to look at least at their charters. Maybe that would be helpful, because I feel at this point that's what we're needing to do next, is move towards that phase. Does that sound good to everyone else?
Yes, I'm willing to work on that. I think I've kind of got started, so I could. But I'm not opposed to anybody else assisting.
Okay, great. So Christina and Linda. Okay, and then Shannon, just to double check, since that's just 2 of them, is that fine for them to work together and collaborate by phone and drop documents together to then bring back to the task force?
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I have is, where are we at as far as the decision on subpoena power? And do we want to try for that? How do you feel about that, Acting Chief Mahuna? Shannon, do you have anything to say about, like, where would we be at as a committee? Because it sounded to me, our guest was saying, it's a powerful thing to be able to have that that in place to then keep people a little bit more accountable and increase access to that information to keep things a little bit more fair.
I'm going to let Shannon answer that one, because that's a legal question about subpoena powers. And I honestly don't know the answer to that.
I mean, in terms of your question, I guess, I mean, I guess the question is, right, does the task force want to recommend that? And then after that, then would come, how do we, write the ordinance to create that, or, so I guess I'm trying to clarify what you mean in terms of like thoughts on it.
Yes, I wasn't even sure how to enact that from this stage, if that would be something we would do as our tier 2, or if that would be something that needs to be written into the charter off the bat, or if it's something that's negotiated later once there's the tier 3 in place. Does that make sense? Because we're still this interim body making recommendations. So I didn't know where that would come into place, like recommending that to be written to the charter. And I guess maybe even Jerry could help me with this. I mean, are we expected to be writing the verbiage for the charter as tier 2, or is that something the city is going to handle based on our recommendation?
A couple things here. I'm having some computer difficulty, but I was going to pull up the task force recommendations that were voted on December 30th. And if anybody has it available, they can correct me. But I remember reading it earlier today, and I think subpoena power was something that was voted on and passed unanimously. I think. I wish I could pull it up. So I don't know that you need to revisit it. I think it's something that Tier 1 already spoke on, and it passed unanimously. Any of the specificity on how things are written or codified is something that our attorneys will take care of. And work with council to develop that language. That's not a task force job. The other thing to just remember with the task force is I looked at the original document, the sort of founding document for the task force. It was from June, and the 9th recommendation there was something along the lines of like, the task force is to be expected to provide the framework. So I would be focused, like, remember that. You don't have to get into how many, I don't want to say it like that, but you don't have to provide extremely specific things. Like, you provided a framework, and that's what the goal of the task force was to do. We can work to right-size those things or scale them for what would be appropriate for Westland. I mean, when you look at some of those documents or from those other cities, I think Denver is one of the smallest of those cities, and I think they have a football team, so they're really big, right? Like it's a big place with a international airport. The point I'm trying to make out is we're a city of 26,000 people, so like you said earlier, look for the framework and those things if you were to study them, not the specificity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So I think at the last meeting we had in December, we generally had a framework of what we wanted to do. And I just want, since we're all here together, I want to revisit that with you guys, with you people, with you humans, sorry, and just make sure that you're still feeling that we're barking up the correct tree. We're thinking about having a body that involves 7 to 9 people. We're thinking about having a body that can call on a professional investigator. That is at least what I gathered is going to be the most effective for us, given our potential budgeting constraints. Is that still what everyone's feeling like, or are people kind of shifting towards just having like one auditor, just having one IG? Are we still kind of feeling like we would like to have a body of community members with voices of, people of color and LGBTQ on that body as a way to bring concerns of people who've traditionally been marginalized up to the city? And I just wanted to kind of get a sense from my fellow members if that's still what we were looking at.
Chair Nicole, yes, I think you're correct, and I think that's where we're at. but at the end of the day, we need approval from the city council and the city manager that this entity, this oversight task force, is viable. I mean, we can. I mean, Linda and Shannon can go out. I mean, Linda and Christina can go out and do all the work possible, and then 3 months down the road, we kick to the curb. So, and it's, the potential of even hiring a selection organization that looks at, employment. I mean, it affects everything. It affects the potential of even the response of making sure that company is friendly to the diversity, and so if we want to be a part of the game, we got to be on a team, and right now we're not no player. So if you can stretch Jerry's arm in the city council to make us viable, I think that's a heads up for Linda and heads up for Christina to know that they're doing the work that's going to make a difference. And I think that's where we are, especially with in regards to determining our model scope and focus. We got to get approved the criteria for appointment and finding 7 and 9 people. Those things, it may not come from our committee, it may come from the city council, and any and everything we're trying to put together. So I'm hopeful that our last guest speaker stated that we have to take these things to the chief of police. And I think that's something that when you forward me the Chair Nicole, the charter of City of West Linn, I mean, that's something that I'm going to continue to study to see if we do have a voice or can create a voice.
But I feel like they're giving us that opportunity here with asking us to come up with the task force, and whether or not they take the recommendation is separate. But obviously we want to do our homework, and thank you too so much, Christine and Linda, for helping us do that homework, because then it may lend a little bit more credibility to our recommendations if we can pull from someone formally recognized by a NACOL authority as excellent, and we're going to fashion our ideas after them. So that would be great. So I'm feeling like, though, in the next couple of meetings, I would like us to be able to get a written framework that is based on some of our other research and what we've seen from our other past data collections, that we can get onto paper and go ahead and give it to city so they can take it from there. Are you all feeling like we're getting towards, being able to wrap up this process in the next couple of meetings, or how do you all feel about where we're at now?
Linda and Mary have their hands raised.
I'm not sure if Mary, why don't you go ahead, and then
Okay.
I'll.
Sorry, Nikki, I couldn't hear you for just a second, and I don't want to interrupt your task force process, but I did want to just briefly address what Michael was saying, and I feel confident. I know I can speak for myself as a counselor, and I'm pretty confident that I'm representing what I've heard the rest of the council. It's not if we should be doing this work, it's just how. So I believe that is going to, without being able to promise exactly what it's going to look like, I can tell you that I've heard it echoed by other council members too, that it's not if oversight work should happen, it is how. So, and thank you again for all of your volunteer hours.
Thank you, Councilor Gardner. Linda?
Thank you, Michael. That was important that you said that. And as I'm going to be looking at a lot of these models with Kristen, I'm thinking that I'm also going to, Krista, I'm sorry. I'm also knowing that I'm going to be calling different point people, if I can find them in these different NACOL models that they've been using, and asking questions. So, and I'm hoping that we can actually access a trainer I think that's going to be extremely important. There's so many people that know what they're doing. They've been doing it for years. So I don't believe it's something we should be doing completely on our own when we have excellent trainers out there to work with and are willing to work with us and have put all the time and energy and data and out there. So I'm confident we can come up with something very concrete a very strong framework. Now I just lost my train of thought. It's starting to get late. Think.
I just have one question about
Sure.
when you us accessing trainers, do you mean as this body, or do you mean as the permanent oversight body?
Let's see what we find out, because that was what I was going to say. As I was reading and listening to these training models with NACOL, they said that, you really have to figure 6 months to a year. And if you look at how well thought out these things are, you just don't wrap it up and as I had brought up before, we got off to a really rocky start. We should have had a chair right from the beginning. We should have looked at, and I would say that as whatever this new entity is, we need to treat it just like we do all our other citizen task force, citizen advisory committees. They need to do their homework before they even get together. Look at Chapter 2 of the Municipal Code and citizen advisory boards. Know what you're responsible for. And then moving forward, if you need subcommittees, but we didn't have a chance to gel. So I'm not that optimistic that we can just wrap this up in a couple of weeks. I think that's overly optimistic, and I think it's going to take time to dig through all this information to do it well. So I'm kind of, as much as I don't want to keep doing this for a year, heaven forbid, but I do think we need some time let's see what we come up with in the next week. I can check in with whoever I need to check in with and let them know what I've found so far. What Christine and I come up with so far, and then say, okay, this is going to take us, just another week, or there's a lot of stuff here for us to go through. So I'd like to leave it a little open-ended right now. Question mark?
No, yeah, I appreciate that. No, you're right. There is a lot of material to cover. I just, on the other hand too, I want to be respectful of what the council had asked us to do. If they just want the framework, or if they want like the fleshed out version, I think those are two very different things.
Yeah.
So Jerry, do you have any further input, or Councilor Baumgartner on that? Like, is council looking for a very
well, I'd clarified. I'd say, do you want 3 frameworks, 5 frameworks, 10 frameworks?
Sir?
Muted, Jerry?
Jerry, were you throwing that ball over to me?
Yeah, so Councilor Baumgartner wasn't on council when that document was created, but sorry, you are the counselor, so.
I am. And actually, I guess what I'd like to do is defer to your experience. I mean, what you have learned from your research. I think you have a lot more. All of you have a lot more insight into what would be best, quite honestly, than I do. I'm sorry, that's not very helpful direction.
So what I think was vague from the beginning was the framework piece. Like how much of this do we need to have sorted out? Is it that we need to have it all drawn up and ready to go so it's a plug and play, this is the model that's going to be best for our community, or this is the general model and the community is wanting to move forward with this degree of transparency, and we'll let these people figure it out. So I think the whole time we've been meeting, there's been this question of how many of these rabbit holes are we running down? How much extra information are we gathering versus we really need to get a lot of data because we want to come up with a really nice package to present to council that they could say, oh, this is wonderful and this is going to work.
Well, I think part of the reason why this is a little bit, it's multifaceted and it's a huge issue that I think any given one of you, I'm just going to guess, weren't experts on going into this. I mean, there was a huge amount of good intention and desire to put an effort forth to do good work here, but no, I mean, this is how I've been tackling this. I mean, I personally started doing research on this back in the spring and over the summer before I even decided to run for office. And I mean, the more I learned, the more I found out that there was so much more to learn. So just the very nature of this is going to be an evolving process. We're talking about changes to the public safety agency of the police department that we are, we as in the community and the task force would be imposing upon a system that's been in place, and there's some presumptions there and negotiating delicacy and wanting to work with and not against. So there's a lot to this. So I think it's going to be an evolving process by the nature of it. I think having something set in stone doesn't, I'm not expecting to have something that's completely done, I guess. I'm expecting something that is a framework. Is that a reasonable kind of covering the question?
Well, and I think it also speaks to the fact that these just naturally evolve anyway. But yeah, I think what we owe to the city is the framework. And my question is, if we can just tell you what we think the general model is going to be, if that would be sufficient to then go about getting those applicants, having them come together as the permanent body, and then going forward in designing want to be designed, or figuring out the details of how they work. But I want to be respectful, honestly, of everyone's time. It's 8:03, so thank you all for hanging in there. Does any last comments?
If you don't mind, I'll be quick. I would just ask the task force to take a look at that last the document from the 30th of December, and just and think about that as the framework, and then just think, what do you feel like you need to add? I think that, because I don't know if we talked about that, but I would just pose that to the group.
Yep.
And I think we all still have access to that on Dropbox for those of us who can get on it easily and see the data.
One final thing, I spoke to Shannon just before this meeting. Shannon is going to, and Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, talk to Dylan, who I work with, to work out any problems with Dropbox and straighten out any communication issues. I know that's sort of always been in a discussion, but they just need to connect, and I think we'll be in touch with Nicole. And Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, please.
No, that's correct. I'm going to follow up with Dylan, and then I'll be reaching out to Nicole and just make sure that I'm understanding how it's being used and setting it up. I don't actually so when you ask some questions about it, I don't know actually how it's set up. So need to kind of get some base information before I can resolve that.
Okay, thanks, Shannon. Thank you. Looking for any other hands up, but I think we'll all have a chance between now and then. Well, Linda and Christina are going to be very busy. But I think, we could also, all of us as a team can look at the last recommendations all of our compatriots had drafted and make sure there isn't anything else we need to add, or if there is, let's add it. And we can hear from, what the other experts in San Jose, Oakland, DC, and Fairfax or in Denver are doing, and look at really taking the long, hard look at what else we can use in our fair city of West Linn. So thank you all so much for your time. And I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Jerry has something.
Last question, I promise, but we need to work these things out.
Yes.
Should we schedule the next meeting for 2 weeks from now on Wednesday night? Because that's sort of what we did in the fall, and it seems to work. Okay.
Well, I think it doesn't work for everyone. I think it wasn't working for Fred. Their time was they need dinner time. So, but I think it's hard for the other people who are working during the day to. I mean, you don't want to see me in the OR.
Right.
Not gonna work.
But I guess what I'm saying is, if this doesn't work, then we need another day and time, and that was.
I don't have a solid day and time that works for everyone. So I think 2 weeks from now is going to be the easiest, most predictable. We're used to it. And
we'll do it at 6 to 8. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. And thanks again, Acting Chief Mahuna, for sneaking us in.
Thank you all.
All right. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.